Welcome back to episode 3 of The Purple Worm, the podcast where a group of British guys talk about things going on with RPGs. In this third episode, we conclude our dive into the world of weird RPGs. And we start off with Colin Green, aka Spike Pit, talking about Troika and fighting fantasy.
I was going to talk about a kind of a rip-off of Fighting Fantasy, and I've been thinking about it more. I was listening to Dave on D Percentile there. He was talking about how he got into gaming and the roots of Fighting Fantasy, and I got out my copy of Troika again, looked through it, and there's just no mention of Fighting Fantasy, and I've decided that that's the weirdest part of it. That you'd write a game and then put no credits or no mention of anything that is so clearly an inspiration. It makes me now want to speak to the designer and actually ask him, is there a story there? I feel like there's
I think that'll be a good interview for someone if you get hold of Daniel Sell and find out.
Well, I'll be looking for him at Dragon Meet in November.
So I engaged with him on Twitter, and he said, "Yeah, we're very open about our sources." But he said in this edition of Troika, their IP lawyer advised them not to. And he said they as they go through, they try hard to find the right voice, because one of the things I picked up, the Oops table is right from Pete Tamlin and Mark Gascoigne's Dungeoneer. I mean, the name of the table is lifted directly. And he said, yeah, in a later edition we might change that, but we're trying to find the right balance between acknowledgement and not explicitly mentioning. So I wasn't entirely happy with the answer that I got, but he basically says, yeah, we got advice not to mention it. But he also says Steve Jackson knows what we're doing and gives it his full blessing. But I kind of thought, if you give it your full blessing, why not acknowledge it? But there is the matter that somebody else has got the license for Advanced Fighting Fantasy. Who's it? Graham Botley.
Oh, that's probably it then, isn't it?
Yeah, Graham Botley's got the Advanced Fighting Fantasy license, yeah.
Well, that's what it is. So there's your story. I think that is exactly the story.
I've got a weird one for you, Colin.
You can copy a game mechanic, but you can't copy other stuff.
I've got another weird one for you, Colin. Mouseguard.
Oh yes, Mouseguard.
Now, again, thing I find weird about that is I've played it a few times. It uses a simplified version of the Burning Wheel system. However, one of the weird things I found about it is because it's very easy to sort of fall into like the standard sort of RPG sort of like tropes. But we were playing in a game where we're playing these sort of swashbuckling style like Mouseguard, and we're wandering through some fields, and the GM's like, oh, an owl swoops down towards you, and at first I'm just like, an owl, and then like 5 seconds later I'm sort of like, oh wait a minute, I'm like 2 inches tall. And something which is very sort of commonplace, you're suddenly like, oh, it's not just an owl, it's this gigantic like harbinger of doom that like blots out the moon and can just like snatch you or your companions up and you'll never be seen again. And that sort of juxtaposition, taking the commonplace and sort of making it quite monstrous, that made the setting feel sort of weird in a good way, but sort of quite strange and quite sort of otherworldly to me.
I mean, different, yeah.
Yeah, when I read Mouseguard, it took me back to Terry Pratchett's first book, The Carpet People, which I read when I was about 7 years old.
Great book. Where
people living in the carpet. And as a kid, that absolutely terrified me, the little people living in the carpet. But Mouseguard gave me the same sort of feel.
Also, it's like it's weird because you create these sort of like these backgrounds, which you think like, you almost have like a the old traveller sort of life path system. You have like a bit of a sort of version of that, but it's what your particular mouse used to do like beforehand. So it's like my character, I was like, my father was like the village baker, and I sort of followed him into being a baker afterwards. So I was playing like this jolly like fat mouse who'd like spent all his time in the bakery like baking for the village, and then he was like, oh, I want a bit more out of life, and went to become like one of the Mouseguard. And that'd be a perfectly normal background if you were like, I'm playing a D&D game. Oh yeah, I was the village baker's son, and then I was like, oh, I want to go away and be a fighter. And then you're like, yeah, but it seems weirder because I'm a tiny mouse who was a baker making tiny bits of bread for other mice, and now I've decided to become like a tiny mouse warrior fighting against like snakes and rats and stuff like that. So it's just that juxtaposition of like commonplace stuff, so being a baker, and the weird stuff, like the whole scale of the world being different, that just makes everything seem a little bit odd and a little bit weird.
You're right, man. That is quite weird, that game, and I've got that. I've got the box set of that, and that is a lovely box set as well, and competitively priced. I think is a really great value.
Mouseguard was like the first game I'd not really heard of like the comics that it's based on like beforehand. And as soon as I'd finished playing it, I was like, right, went out and got like a collected edition of like some of the comics and read through all that. It then led on to me like getting like Burning Wheel. I've got like the 2 books of that sort of there. So I was like, oh, I want to know more about this system. And that's a game a lot of people like haven't played, and it's got like its own sort of oddities and its own sort of like particular flavour. But it sort of, the Mouseguard was so weird, it left such an impression on me that immediately I was like, right, I want to know a bit more about this system. Right, so I'm going to get Burning Wheel, and I like the background, so I want to know a bit more of the background, so I'm going to get some of the comics and read them. And so I think weirdness, when it's used in like a compelling way, it can really sort of draw you in to a game and make you want to find out more about it. I think that's the strength of like a weird game.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned weird. If there's a thing I find weird, it is the presentation of the rules in Burning Wheel. I cannot get, even despite your podcast, Ray Otis talked about it, I think, recently, but I cannot get into them. I just cannot understand. I understand that it's a distinctive game. Everybody raved about it. I bought it many, many years ago. I pick it up occasionally because the books are quite good looking, but I just cannot get into it. I can't find a way in.
Yes, I've read, I'm sort of reading through it now, and it's like, I love it. I love the sort of like the strong like Tolkien vibe that's going on here, but when I'm reading it, I'm like, would I run it?
I get the impression it's like Fate. It's one of those games you read, you can't understand it. I think if you played with someone that knew how to play it, you'd probably get it.
Well, that's, right. I mean, we're Johannes is on about running it for us, and I'm like, if I played in like a few games, like a long running game of it, I'd probably then go, right, I'm maybe ready to dip my toe into the water of like trying to run like a one shot or something. But again, and then I'm like, yeah, but it's a game that's really built for campaign play. It's not built for one shots. So I think that's something against it as well, because we all know like how it can be difficult to like get long running campaigns going. So I think if you've got a game where you can be like, right, so let's take Fifth Ed as an example, because everyone knows it. If you take Fifth Ed, you could easily pick up Fifth Ed and go, right, I'm running a one shot dungeon crawl or whatever, boom, good to go. You can also go, it's got an experience system, it's got levels, I can run a campaign of it. So I think having both of those options makes a game have more broader appeal, whereas the rules are quite complicated in like Burning Wheel, and they're really tied in quite heavily with the whole idea of advancement on a campaign level. So I think in order to get, and the author even says like, to get the best out of the game, you need to run a really long running campaign. It's like, well, how often does that happen?
It's hard to see when you would see the payoff.
Yeah,
if the game works over the long term.
It's like the author again says directly, he's like, in order to get the best out of a Burning Wheel game, both the GM and the players have to like put a lot of dedication and a lot of effort into it. Now, it's all very well to like say that, and if you can do that is great, absolutely pucker, brilliant. But how difficult is it to get like a group of people, especially if it's a larger group, everyone with things going on in their life and everyday life? If you think about how difficult it can be to organise a one shot or a two shot or a weekly game, or even like an every other week game for like the space of a few months. If you're like, right, we're going to play this game, but to really get the best out of it, we're going to have to play it for about 5 years. most people are going to be like, stick with Fifth Ed, thanks, mate.
What about Mouseguard as an on-ramp? I've heard that would be the way to go if you want to crack that game.
The thing about Burning Wheel, I think there's a misnomer that it's vastly complicated. It's not. There's a lot of it, but a lot of it is like optional subsystems. I mean, the author even said, like Luke Crane even says, don't start the game trying to like include everything, because you're just overwhelming yourself. It's like, just give a random example I can think of from Mouseguard. In Mouseguard, there's effectively 2 ways you can do a combat. There's like a very simple sort of you roll, I roll, we work it out, moving on sort of style combat, which is more like your traditional sort of RPG combat. Or there's one where you match maneuvers against the opponent. So like you choose what sort of attack maneuver you're doing. The opponent
it's like a blind. It's like a blind
it's
bid.
like rock paper scissors almost. You both pick your moves, and then someone's work better against other ones. And it's like, if you don't want to get in, because that is more complicated. But if you don't want to get into that, you can quite happily run Mouseguard without ever touching that bit of the rules, and you'll still have a good game. And all it is in Burning Wheel is there's more of these optional systems. So it's like the various races have their own like different types of magic. So like for humans, there's like clerical magics or miracles, if you will. Now that has its own like subsystem. But if you don't want to touch that subsystem, or you haven't got anyone who wants to play a cleric, you never need to use those rules whatsoever. And there will still be plenty of other like different ways you could do magic in it. So in a way, it's almost got that whole sort of like toolkit vibe to it, where the person who wrote the book's gone, here's lots of stuff you can use, pick the little bits you like. It's like,
is it the design choices that are weird then? I mean, because there's the jarring juxtaposition thing in Mouseguard that I actually think we're getting pretty close to weird there. And then Dave, and you're kind of backing it up, John. And I think there's some weird design choices that have gone on with that Burning Wheel that means you're alienating a lot of your potential audience just by saying, this game, you're in it for the long haul, and for the reasons you've outlined, that can be difficult. That is quite weird.
I don't know if it's a case of deliberately trying to alienate people. I think it's a case of like, this is the sort of game that like Luke Crane runs, so therefore that's what he's written the rules for, so he could have a game that he wants to run, and sort of publishing it so other people can run it is almost like an afterthought. That's not to say it's like badly put together or anything like that, because the books are quite nifty, but he's very much written it to suit his style of play, which is the long sort of epic Tolkien-esque sort of campaigns.
Do you think then if you ran it under something like BX or OD&D that it would lose the flavour of the setting?
I think you could do it. Don't get me wrong. I think the difference is there's a lot of that sort of Tolkien vibe like baked into the rules. So I was talking like before we started about how the different races have their different ways of like doing things. So let's say you go, I've got a human who wants to make some armour. You'll like have an armour smithing skill. You get the metal, you make it into armour as you would do normally. If you're a dwarf, you'd probably have like prayers and runes that you would say over it and stuff like that. If you're an orc, it's more about you like getting this metal and just through like raw aggression, just like beating it into the shape of armour, almost like beating the metal into submission. So even like normal skills, the way they're sort of flavoured in the book, it's very evocative of the kind of race you're playing. So for the elves, everything is mystical. Everything takes like a long time. So if you're a human, you're like, right, I need to knock out 3 suits of armour in like 4 days because like my boys need some armour. Whereas if you're an elf, you're like, it takes me 20 years to like make this amazing like armoured breastplate. What of it? That's like a summer's afternoon for me. Whereas if you're an orc and you're short-lived, you're like, if I don't smash some armour out in the next like few hours, that bigger orc over there is probably going to chop my arms off, and that'll be the end of me. So everything has this sort of Tolkien-esque flavour. So elves are mystical. Every race apart from humans also has like a negative trait. So elves have, I think it's called like despair or something like that, and it's basically comes from the fact that because they're so long-lived, it's like every time like you see a friend die or you witness the passing of a civilization or something like that, you gain despair. And when it gets up to a certain level, that's when you go to like the boats that are heading to like the Grey Havens, and you depart the world because you're just like, I can't bear to see like anyone I love like die anymore, so I'm going to go to like the lands of the young or whatever, where like everyone stays young forever and I'm with my own people. If you're a dwarf, you have greed, where like every time you accumulate something, that you hoard something away, it goes up, and when it gets to the top level, that's when you like lock yourself away in like your mountain stronghold and your big pile of treasure, like it's mine, all mine, and you stay there on your big hoard. If you're an orc, it's like you get, I think it's called wrath or something like that, and it's basically just because like your life is just nasty and brutish. That is what your life is. And with theirs, as they go up, they become more powerful. But at each level, it's like you run the risk of taking like injuries because orcs are always fighting for dominance. So you can always like risk like, oh, I've got some more wrath, and you might be like, oh yeah, but I've lost like a hand because I was in like a fight for dominance from like my tribal chief. And it's like you can always at any point go like, oh, do you know what? I'm not going to go up to the next level. I'm good. I'm going to stick with what I've got. I'm going to stay where I am. But there's always that temptation. Oh, if I push it a little bit further, but I run the risk of losing a little bit more of my character, whether like literally or figuratively. So the system really does like support the flavour, and I think you could certainly storytell a lot of that. That's not a problem. You could do it with BX, but I don't know. There's just something about having it sort of baked into the system that like quite appeals to me when I'm reading it. Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, what you said then sounds really cool. I've just never got that far. In all the times I've picked it up, I've just never.
Yeah,
been able to
it's no.
Is that what you find? Is that what you're finding weird then, Dave? The fact that you just keep bouncing off it. I mean, you're a clever guy. You've read plenty of rules. Is there something weird going on that's keeping you out?
I find it impenetrable because I think it's like, as John was saying, to understand the game, you've got to play it for ages. It almost seems like to understand the rules, you've got to have read every bit and be able to see how they all join up. And there's something that breaks the cycle for me. I need to have a bit I can understand and move on to the next bit I can understand.
I tell you what, there is something even weirder about Burning Wheel though. In the sort of like the main book, like the core book, if you will, for like Burning Wheel Gold, which is like the current edition, it's the red one you can sort of see just there. That gives you all the game rules. However, there is virtually nothing in that book about how to run a game of Burning Wheel. It's literally like all the rules, but not how to run it. Whereas if you see that book next to it that's blue, that's the Burning Wheel Codex. And that is the second book. And that is literally, you've got all the rules. Here's how to run a game of Burning Wheel. And it's that strikes me as very weird. Because it's like, although obviously in like use D&D, you have the Player's Handbook, you have the DMG. In the Player's Handbook, there's always like at least a little bit about running a game. So like, if you don't have the DMG, you're all good. You can still, normally there's even a few monsters at the back of a Player's Handbook. You can still run the game. That's fine. But I've got it until I read the Codex for Burning Wheel. I was like, yeah, this is really cool, and like it's really making me like into that Tolkien vibe. But I would not have one clue about how to run a game using this book. Whereas when I got the Codex and it's like explaining it, I was like, oh right, so that's what they're shooting for. That's the effect they're going for. But I'm like, it's weird that I've had to buy a second book to tell me how to use the first book.
That is weird. So in summary, we're just thinking about wrapping things up a little bit. Do we think that we have succeeded or failed in our task of getting to the bottom of this weird RPGs thing? What's everybody's
I think one man's weirdness is another man's normality. That's the trouble.
Yeah, I mean, as with any of these sort of terms, like weird is a subjective term. And as we found out when we were talking about different games here, that there's some games that like you guys will find weird that I won't, and vice versa. I think you can identify things where you can go, I mean, certainly I know for myself, I can look at it and go, yeah, I can see how people might find that a bit odd. I myself personally don't, but you can sort of appreciate the fact that other people might find it a bit weird. So like say, when we were talking about the Lamentations supplements earlier on, I'm like, I have no problem with any of these supplements. I enjoy a lot of them. Absolutely grand. Body horror, yeah, bring it on. No problems. But then you can also look at it and you go, yeah, I can see how it's not everyone's cup of tea.
What about you, Dave? Have we found another one of those sort of ill-defined terms that gets bandied around, the weird RPG?
Yeah, well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, but we didn't go etymological enough either, did we? We haven't looked outside RPGs really to think about how people conceptualize the weird, and we haven't got time to do that now. But I'm definitely with John that even that was interesting because I was thinking, yeah, I'm cool. I love my Lamentations supplements, body horror, and then Pete brought something to the table I'd never seen made before. That I was like, oh yeah, that is a little bit outside of my comfort zone. So it's interesting. Yeah.
So to finish off this podcast episode, we're just going to talk a little bit about the games that we're playing at the moment. So, Colin, do you want to tell us about what games you've been playing recently? Because I know there's like a massive list of them.
Not really, no.
Well, get on with it, you toe rag.
No, just So I'm just a bit overcommitted, to be fair. So I'm playing in the man himself's game there, John Large's CSI Midlands. I'm playing in on and off in Delving Deeper with Cody Marza. So I've got my face-to-face game in Waterdeep with DM Ricky. Had a bit of a try-in session the other day. I'll talk about that in the podcast, a little bit about pacing and stuff. Ash, enjoying Ash, and we're 19 sessions in at that game, so that's had a fair run. That's fortnightly, so 19 sessions fortnightly, coming on for a year. And then started playing Pathfinder 2, set in Glantry from the known world. Yeah. That's like a wizard school type of game. Also, can't forget King of Dungeons with, what's his name now? Some fella called Dave. Oh, there he is. D percentile himself. And that's probably been the most interesting for me because I feel like I'm into something quite different there. Pathfinder 2 is a little bit out of my comfort zone. I've got like 3 or 4 character sheets that I end up flicking through, and I enjoy the session because of the people I'm playing with, and Kevin Madison's running it, the Dungeon Muser. But I've got to say it wouldn't be my choice. Nothing wrong with it. I think it's probably better than Pathfinder 1 for me. They've done some clever stuff. But King of Dungeons, it's quite interesting. That is, I must say, and I'm enjoying that. I think that's about it. On and off in Kalmar. Kalmar's been a little bit patchy lately. I think Jason's playing other stuff now, and the Delving Deeper, I have to struggle to fit it in. Oh, the other game I'm playing is a Broken Lands, where I'm playing a hobgoblin. I'm enjoying that with Carl Rodriguez. Aaron Clark plays in it quite a lot. Gabrielle, the Grill Wizard, and they're good lads to play with. So I think that is about it. And I myself are running a bit of Tunnel Goons, just trying out ideas. So that's me.
Cool. So what about yourself then, Dave? What are you playing at the minute?
Yeah, so I'm enjoying getting into online play. So that's reasonably new for me, and I'm enjoying the fact that pretty much any time I go onto the Audio Dungeon Discord, I could jump into a game, and that any time I'd offer one, I could probably get a group together. So that's been really cool. In terms of commitments at the moment, yeah, as Colin's mentioned, King of Dungeons, which I just podcasted about today. I think we are in danger of finding the creeks in that system. So I'm really enjoying running that. I'm really enjoying the group. But we're in danger of finding out what doesn't work, I think, with King of Dungeons. That's good fun. That's part of the experience. In terms of games I'm playing, I've committed as much as I can, because it all happens in the middle of the night on a Thursday or Friday morning, to Larry, Follow Me and Die's Delving Deeper game, which I really, I'll be honest, I haven't really played a full-on OSR game in this way, where we are just being completely cautious, taking 20 minutes about opening a door, hirelings all over the place. That's one of the biggest things that I didn't really understand. Just constant hiring of hirelings. We've got whole armies going down into the dungeon, which I was interested when I spoke to Griff that was a feature of the early game. And then lots of one shots. I've played a couple of one shots with Arlen, got another one coming up. I think I've just been recruited into a play by email Pendragon game, and then my con games. So this weekend I'm running the Black Hack at a con, and I think Blythe and Dirk the Dice from the Grognard Files are going to be playing in that game. So I've got to be on my game for that. I'm going to go to bed nice and early the night before.
Okay, excellent. So how about yourself then, Pete?
Yeah, well, currently I'm running Lamentations of the Flame Princess, as we discussed earlier, with using the Stonehell Dungeon. And, I'm running that on a virtual tabletop as a face-to-face game, using a big 40-inch screen. I've got between about 5 and 8 players playing that one. I've just come to an end of doing a D6 Star Wars campaign. I ran two sessions, or 2 campaigns simultaneously with 2 different groups. That one's just come to an end. And then tomorrow night, I'm running ICRPGs. We're going to do Aliens with the old Colonial Marines and facehuggers.
Nice.
So that's the first time I've run ICRPG, so I'm prepping for that one. And then online, I've been playing Barrow Maze with Cody. So that's the first online gaming I've done. At the moment, I haven't got much time to run any more online games, but hopefully that will change. And then the other couple of games I've been playing, Marvel Superheroes. That's an ad hoc, usually on a Thursday night when we haven't got anything else planned. And a bit of the old Judge Dredd RPG.
Oh, nice.
But good one about that is you can just pick it up at any time, do a scenario it's like a one shot a night, and then move on.
Excellent.
So that's me.
Lovely. And for myself, as Colin said, I'm running my CSI Midlands Castles and Crusades game. I'm playing in Johannes Pavela's Stars Without Numbers campaign. Playing in Cody Mazza's Delving Deeper game whenever I can, although I have the Stars Without Number on alternating Sundays, so I can't play in all of the games I'd like to in that. I played recently in a two-shot of D&D 3.5, which is a bit of a blast from the past, and in between that I'm trying to find time to do the odd blog post and record the odd podcast, although I can't really keep up with Colin's prodigious podcast episodes that he puts out. If he's not got another 5 episodes out by the time I get back from work each day, I'm on the phone to him going, what's going on, what are you playing at? So that is what we've all been playing. I hope you've enjoyed our rambling about various weird games. Obviously, if you want to let us know what you think is a weird game, or you want to call us on any of the old BS that we've been talking about, you can leave a voicemail message on Anchor, and I'm sure when we get round to recording another episode of this, we'll try and answer some of those voicemail messages. So thanks very much. So from me and from all the guys, Pete, Colin and Dave, take care, and hopefully we'll catch you all soon. See you later.
Cheers.
That's a wrap.
Bye.